Well, hey, everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat segment. Really pleased and proud to bring you a very special guest tonight, Jacob Hester. Most of you remember Jacob on that 2007 national championship team. But before '07 and '05 and '06, Todd Monken was the passing game coordinator, and Jacob Hester was a part of that team. I'm going to ask Jacob about playing under Todd Monken. But we're going to start out by asking Jacob Hester about playing on a staff that Kirby Smart was a part of. So, Jacob, let's start it there. What was it like to be on a team where Kirby Smart was the coach?
Right. So when I first got to LSU, actually, Kirby Smart was the defensive backs coach in 2004, and I was trying to play both ways. Coach Saban, actually, I came there as a running back, fullback, and he said, "Hey, I think you're one of the best 30 players on the team. We don't really have a spot for you right now at running back, but we wanted to get you on the field." And so poor Kirby had to stay, I'm telling you, until midnight during training camp to try to teach me Nick Saban's defense. And I've always really appreciated that about Kirby because he didn't have to do that. I was a young freshman, didn't really know if I was going to play, but it's something that he wanted to do. And then Todd Monken was the receivers coach the next 2 seasons when I was at LSU. I saw him coach guys like Dwayne Bowe, Buster Davis, Early Doucette, and I thought a lot of Coach Monken. I played against him when he was with the Jaguars and I was with the Chargers. We would catch up before the game, always kind of stayed in contact because Coach Monken was actually the guy who recruited me when he was at Oklahoma State out of high school. So I had a lot of contact with Coach Monken. We've kept in touch over the years. Of course, he went on, did great things, turned Southern Miss around for a short period of time. Then he's been a coordinator at the NFL level. So I'm excited to see what he can do in year one under, Kirby Smart now as the offense coordinator.
We're going to jump into a lot of Todd Monken with you, Jacob, but I want to back up a little bit. You say you were coached by Kirby Smart. Obviously, Kirby's gone on now doing great things, and we can hear Kirby from outside those fences. Was he that loud and animated back then? And just tell folks that don't know, what's it like to be coached by Kirby Smart?
Yeah, he was loud and animated, but not in a bad way, right? Some coaches can be that guy who yells at you for no purpose. When Kirby yelled at you, there was a purpose to it. He wanted to make sure that you understood what was going on. And with Nick's defense, there was a lot of moving parts. It's not an easy defense to pick up. And so you kind of had to be the guy who was yelling and making sure that you were paying attention because you didn't want to miss something. But he was an encourager. There's no question about that. He was going to get on you, but he would come back afterwards and he would say, "Okay, well, here's why I had to yell at you. Here's why I had to let you know that you were doing wrong." And so, look, it was only a short period of time, but I appreciated my time with Kirby. And, of course, I've kept in contact with him. I've seen him a couple of times when LSU and Georgia have played each other and had the chance to catch up with him.
Yeah, no doubt, Jacob. Also, Derek Dooley was the running backs coach. Now tell me about that. Another Georgia name.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Coach Dooley, obviously his dad is an absolute legend when it comes to Georgia football. But when I first got to LSU, I'll be honest with you, Mike, our 2004 staff was stacked. Coach Saban, obviously a defensive coordinator, Jimbo Fisher's the OC, Dooley's the running back coach, Muschamp's the DC, Kirby Smart's the defensive backs coach. Our GAs were James Coley and Damian Craig. I mean, we really had a heck of a staff. Stacy Searles was the offensive line coach, and these guys have gone on and they've had huge roles at other universities, and we were all under one staff.
So you can understand why Jacob is such a valuable resource for ESPN. He knows these guys. He played for these guys. And, of course, he won that national championship at LSU. Now everybody's talking about the new LSU national championship. I know you're awful proud of these guys. And we see Georgia, Jacob, talking about trying to make the transition like LSU did. It didn't come easy. That was Joe Burrow's second year. What are your thoughts about Georgia trying to go from that power pro-style offense to more of a spread, air raid under Monken? How similar do you think that is to what LSU was able to do last season?
Well, so a lot of people, when they see LSU's offense, they think, okay, well, it's a college spread, when in fact Joe Brady actually brought a lot of NFL principles to that offense. A lot of those 2- and 3-man route combinations were NFL combinations that he learned with his time, with Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints. And so it's something that I know Todd Monken is going to try to bring to Georgia. You wish they had a spring football. There's no question about that to implement a new system. You're going to have a new starting quarterback regardless of which guy wins that battle. And I think Jamie Newman definitely has the leg up there. But, You wish they had that spring practice. You wish they had the summer workouts, not even with the football, just so they could create that culture and chemistry together in the weight room, on the field. I know they got some of that, but you would have liked to seen it in a normal situation, but nothing about 2020 has been normal. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for it to maybe hit as good as it could have if you had a normal off season leading into this, because you would have had a full slate of installation. You could have slowly, implemented your offense, the new terminology, everything that goes with that. And now you have to hit fast forward a little bit and try to get as many things in as you can. Probably try to simplify it a little bit so you don't throw too much at them, since they didn't have that spring practice. But look, Coach Monken's been in this game a long time. He's been in a lot of different systems, even going back, to his days at Louisiana Tech when they were throwing the ball all over the place, Oklahoma State. He's been there with Les Miles, as we know, likes to run the football. He's been there with Gundy, who likes to throw the football. So he's been in every system that you could possibly be in. And I think his experience as a head coach and also being a professional coach for so long can help, try to speed things up, because he knows exactly what these guys can handle.
Talking to Jacob Hester, former LSU Tiger. Jacob, we know you best as a 2007 team captain for that LSU national championship team. But in 06, Monken's second year, you led LSU in rushing and receiving. So when we talk about a Todd Monken offense, do we expect a lot of throws to the running back? What are some of the staples and characteristics? I know you said he's flexible, but you've played in that system. You were the main guy. What do you recall about Monken?
Yeah, so he was the passing game coordinator on that 2006 team, and you're exactly right. I think I could have the number off. I think I had 37 catches or somewhere around that, and we threw to the running back a ton. I mean, that was something that was a point of emphasis, to get the ball to the running back. In fact, Clyde Edwards-Helaire gives me a hard time because he passed me up last year. I think he had 50 catches, and I was second on the list for a long time, and he soared past me. But that's what you're going to get. You're going to get, if it's not there, go ahead and get it down to the running back, like you saw LSU do a year ago. That's what we did when Monken was a passing game coordinator, right? You don't have to be a world beater on every single play. Now you're going to have some route combinations that you feel good about, but also the back and the tight end, those can be weapons to you. Now, you don't want that to be the focal point of the offense, but so many times when you have a pro style offense, we're going to run the football to set up the play action pass. The only passes you're going to see us throw are these 30, 40-yard, bombs down the field off the play action pass, when in fact you don't have to do that. And so Coach Monken was really good about, telling the guys, telling Jamarcus, hey, get it down to your running backs, get it down to your tight ends. We also had a tight end, Richard Dixon, that was key to our offense during that time at LSU as well. So he utilized every weapon and didn't just worry about it being, two receivers out there in the route.
No doubt. You mentioned Jamarcus Russell completed 67% of his passes. That 2006 LSU offense that I believe Jimbo was the OC, Monken the passing game coordinator, they were number 1 in the SEC, number 9 in the nation. So a very prolific offense under Les Miles. People forget, they get amnesia. They accuse Les of grounding it out. But that LSU offense that year, Jacob, you guys were really explosive.
No, we were. We had, 4 first-round picks on that team. 3 were from the offensive side of the football. Jamarcus obviously being the number 1 pick, Dwayne Bowe, Buster Davis, both first-round receivers. By the end of that year, we were playing some good football. We beat Notre Dame pretty good in the Sugar Bowl that year. Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija were on that team, Tom Zibikowski. So it was a good Notre Dame team, but we were clicking that year offensively. It might have been the best offense we had at LSU during my time, just because we had so many different weapons. Heck, even the backup quarterback, Matt Flynn, right? He gets in a couple of games and he was thriving as well. So we had a really good chemistry and a good culture where it didn't really matter. If a guy went down, it was next man up. And it was more about the offense that we had integrated. And it was, a kind of a system that was friendly to everybody. And so that offense was really good at LSU. Anytime you can have 3 first-round picks from the same side of the football. And you're right, going back to a lot of people just assume Les was, hey, run your head against that brick wall and just run into those 8, 9, 10-man boxes, But during that time, I mean, we were an innovative offense that, yes, we were, fullback and 21 personnel, but we also opened it up.
41-14 over Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Georgia's hoping that their Sugar Bowl win can catapult them to a national championship. When you look at Georgia and you look at what they bring back on defense, 8 out of those 11 starters. You saw him against LSU, a couple guys in position that just couldn't make the play. Ball goes by the safety's ear hole for the first touchdown. Joe breaks some tackles. Clyde Edwards-Helaire breaks some tackles. How realistic do you think Georgia's national championship hopes are this year, Jacob?
Well, I think the defense, like you said, is going to be one of the best in the country. I think the personnel coming back really sets up nicely for a heck of a year. It's all going to go back to the offense, right? Those are going to be the questions that have to be answered. I like the fact that they have multiple quarterbacks pushing for that job. I think anytime you can create competition in training camp, it's a must because you don't want one guy just thinking, this is my job just by rolling out of bed and showing up. So I think that's very important that JT Daniels did get that waiver. We don't know what, if he's 90%, if he's 95%, whatever that is, but I've got to imagine at some point he is pushing for that starting job. We've talked about it before. I think Georgia is a team that's going to be a running back by committee. That's just kind of who they are, right? And they've got a lot of candidates that can run the football. Receiver, right? Who can step up besides Pickens? Who can be that number 2 receiver? Because when you look, and we keep going back to the LSU offense because they're similar, right? You want to make that 1-year change from what you were to what you want to be. Well, who's going to be that second receiver? Last year, LSU had multiple guys. They had Jamar Chase, they had Justin Jefferson, they also had Terrace Marshall step up, and he took on a bigger role. Thaddeus Moss in the tight end position. So you've got to figure out who's going to be option 2, option 3, and option 4 in an offense that's trying to spread the football around, run the RPOs, because you can't just be a one-trick pony. You can't run the RPOs and have only one guy you count on because in an RPO, think about LSU last year, right? You get the ball to Joe Burrow. Well, he's the number 1 overall pick, right? And if it's an RPO situation, he's possibly faking it to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is a first-round pick. And then he might throw it to Justin Jefferson, who is a first-round pick. And then they had, the Biletnikoff Award winner, Jamar Chase, who was another option, right? So if you're in this system, you have to have guys step up because before the year, Jefferson wasn't a first-round pick. Burrow wasn't a first-round pick. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not a first-round pick. But they earned that right, and they stepped up to the plate. And when you're running the system, that's what you want. You want the defense so terrified that I've got 4 options on this one play, and my 4 options are better than anything that you can do to me, right? And we know Georgia's got the talent. Talent's never been an issue, but it's now implementing this system, and you hope as a Bulldog fan that they've had enough time to learn this system, to feel comfortable in this system, and somehow that chemistry has worked itself out, even though you haven't been on the football field as much as you normally would.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember. I knew Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a great back. I don't know how much pass catching he did. I would ask you this. I mean, you're 5'11", 235. You were branded as a fullback. Obviously, you were much more than that. You played in the NFL and did good things with the Chargers. How hard is it for a running back to transition into that pass game? Because we look at Zamir White. He recently did a video, said, I got to get better at catching the ball. You look at Zamir as maybe more of a downhill kind of guy. Is it an easy transition to make for backs, or is it a challenging one?
I think it's a little bit of a challenge. I'll be real honest with you, Mike. I mean, that my opportunities a lot of the time came because I was a good pass protector and I could catch the football. And in this type of offense, you've got to be able to do both of those things. You have to, have the quarterback's trust in pass protection. I know when I signed with the Denver Broncos and I went on my free agent visit, it wasn't me running through bag drills. It wasn't me doing 40-yard sprints. No, Peyton Manning actually came out onto the football field. He said, "Hey, Hester, here's our, 4 main protections. All right, you got those?" And he gave me about 5 minutes to think about them. We came back on the field. He goes, "You got those protections? All right." He lines up these, the dummies and the bags in front of us. He gets some assistant coaches to be the safeties and linebackers, and he starts sending them. He's like, "All right, if we're in this protection, these guys come. Who do you have? Who do you have on this protection?" And he wanted to know how much I knew in the protection game and if I could process that information fast enough to protect him. And that's what you have to be in this offense because people are going to try to blitz this offense to confuse you, to take you out of what you do. Now, you have a couple of options. You can free release the back, but Mike, you can't do that every time because then you're going to get into a tendency. You don't want to get into tendencies, right? So your back has to be able to be a guy that steps up, takes on the blitz, and your quarterback can trust him. And also, you got to be a guy that can catch the ball because you can be as athletic as you want. You can make as many ooh and ah plays in the open field, but you have to be able to catch the football. The quarterback has to be able to trust you. The running back, to me, has to be trusted more than any player on the offense. for the quarterback because you're sitting next to him, right? You're his outlet in the passing game, right? You're that check down. You're the last option when everything else is breaking down. And also, he has to know that if they're bringing free safety from the backside and he can't see that, that you're not only going to be there, but you're going to protect him. And so the running back's job in this type of offense is so crucial and so important that you have to have that guy. And you might not see the most talented running back play because if the talented guy can't do that, well, guess who's going to play? The guy that can catch and block. And so Georgia's got multiple guys. They've got multiple options, but you might not see the best guy be out there the most if he can't pick those two things up.
That's right. A lot of defensive coordinators have told me they'll trade an 11 or 15-yard swing pass completion to the running back to get a free shot on a quarterback. I mean, and there was only 4 quarterbacks out of 14 in the league that made it through last year. Amazingly, Joe Burrow was one of them, but it wasn't because Joe never got hit. Joe did take some hits in that offense, and you're right. That's probably going to happen. And to your point, JT Daniels is competing, and so is Dwan Mathis and Carson Beck. So probably a good thing. Anything jump out at you when you saw the schedule release, Jacob? I kind of thought it was a little front-loaded for Georgia. I kind of thought that the skids were a little greased from LSU. Am I making a good read there in the West? Does LSU have a chance to repeat after losing all that talent?
You lose 14 guys to the NFL draft, and I think it was 18 total that signed. But yeah, Georgia's a little front loaded. When you look at the contenders, I think the back part of the schedule is going to be extremely easy for the Georgia Bulldogs. And when you're starting over with a new quarterback for Georgia and a new system, obviously you'd rather have that probably backloaded than front loaded. But I don't think it's anything that they can't handle. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out. You mentioned LSU. I do think LSU's got a really nice spread out SEC schedule because anytime you're playing all SEC schools, it's going to be difficult. There's going to be bumps in the road, but I do think it sets up nicely because you look at LSU. Well, of course, they got to play Florida. They play them every year, but they get 3 games that they're going to be favorites in Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Missouri before they play that. You've got South Carolina in between, Florida in the next tough game. And so, also, you got a bye week between Auburn and Alabama. Texas A&M, you get Arkansas before that. And so it really sets up nicely for LSU. It's going to be difficult because there's still difficult stretches. But I think if you ask an LSU fan, hey, place your schedule like you want it, knowing the teams that you have to play, it's set up really nicely for them. And so it's all up to them. Yeah, you don't want to talk about the 14 guys you're replacing. You know how that goes. But you also have to understand, hey, if I'm Miles Brennan, I don't have to be Joe Burrow. I just got to be the best Miles Brennan that I can be. Just like, whoever's replacing Jake Fromm. Well, they don't have to be Jake Fromm. They just got to be the best version of themselves. And so that's always the thing you want to see as a coach when you're replacing, players who had a lot of success like Joe Burrow, like Jake Fromm had at their schools.
Got one more question for you, and then I got to let you go, Jacob. I know you got other commitments. Really appreciate you joining us here on our Ingles on the Beat segment tonight. The whole COVID-19 thing, it's been so great to talk about football last week. We know we're only in phase 3. The players are doing the contact practice September 26th, still a ways off. Just your thoughts about the way the SEC has managed this and your thoughts about the likelihood of a season now moving forward.
I tell you what, I love the SEC leadership and how they've handled everything. They didn't panic. They didn't take their ball and go hide. They have been so patient throughout this entire process. If you'll remember, even when the College World Series was canceled, Commissioner Sankey, now it probably still would have been canceled, but he was like, why are we canceling this right now? We've still got months till we get to that event. And he's kind of taking the same approach to the football season. Hey, we'll push everything back just a little bit, a couple of weeks. We'll give ourselves time. And if we need extra time in between then, that's what we have built in. They didn't, react to what the Big Ten and the Pac-12 did. They said, no, we are going to have our own process. And, he said, hey, we've got 28, 29 plans in place and we'll see what happens. And I think they've done such a great job of just allowing things to play out, right? Allowing things to, okay, well, what happens when students start to get back on campus? Okay, how are we going to handle that? And whatever the situation has been, Commissioner Sankey, Herb Vincent, everybody at the SEC office has done a great job.
And no doubt about it. I'd like to see Commissioner Sankey become the college football commissioner. And then in my dream, Herb Vincent becomes the SEC commissioner. We could only hope. He's a great guy. Jacob, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Love your work with ESPN. Love the show with Chris on Sirius XM Radio. And man, got to get you back again sometime this year.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure, Mike.
Great stuff from Jacob Hester, former LSU National Championship running back, San Diego Charger, and Denver Broncos running back with Peyton Manning. Really enjoyed having Jacob on there. Talking about the COVID-19 crisis, everybody is kind of doing their part right now. We're moving forward as a society, but it's definitely time to reflect on that, because we've all had to make sacrifices. We've all had to do what we've had to do to move the ball forward. And, Ingles has done that for us throughout the whole time. Those workers have been on the front line, keeping those supplies going, keeping your household filled with the great goods that we count on. I want to take a minute to appreciate Ingles and the service that they've had for our country during this difficult time.
It's in our hearts to feel for real. There's been ups and downs, turnarounds, good days and some bad. But we stand together for worse and for better. We'll always have your back, with open arms, heart to heart, hand in hand, community strong.
Welcome back. Mike Griffith here, and really enjoyed having Jacob Hester on from LSU, a guy that played under Todd Monken for 2 years. Todd Monken was the LSU passing game coordinator when Jacob was there as a running back, and led LSU in receptions in 2006, Monken's final year there under Les Miles. So he provided some great insight, a different spin than I'd heard about the importance of the running back. Really makes you wonder who Georgia's going to have back there in that single back set. As Jacob said, somebody that's got to be good in protection, somebody that you can rely on to catch the football, and obviously someone that can run the ball. Will that be Zamir White? Will it be Kenny McIntosh? Could Kendall Milton and James Cook, how and where will he be used? So many things to talk about. And Georgia just now starting to get it going. Saturday had a padded practice, a little scrimmage action. Hearing great things about the quarterbacks, hearing great things about Jamie Newman, hearing great things about JT Daniels. Of course, the teammates will tell you all about Dwan Mathis. He's clearly a locker room favorite after all he's been through. And then Carson Beck, the best high school quarterback in the state of Florida. And now he's a Bulldog. And will Carson be willing, to develop physically and wait for his moment in this Georgia offense? So many questions as Georgia moves forward into week 2. Not going to get a chance to talk to Kirby for a while. So I know Kirby Smart's kind of surveying things. We did talk with Dan Lanning on Friday. Thought it was pretty interesting. I thought Dan gave a really good breakdown of what the individual players were doing. It certainly sounds like Jalen Carter is a guy who's going to make an impact on the defensive line. Who knows? Maybe a potential freshman All-American candidate. We saw that out of Jordan Davis a couple of years ago. This Georgia front seven is absolutely loaded with future NFL players, and they're going to need to be. You heard Jacob and I talk a little bit about that schedule the first half of the show. You got Arkansas. That's a layup. But when you play a stretch of Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, and Kentucky, let me tell you, that's some pretty intense trench warfare. So that Georgia defensive front is going to have to be ready, because that's a murderer's row of offensive lines. According to Cole Kubelik of ESPN, 3 of those teams, Tennessee, Alabama, Kentucky, the top 3 offensive lines in the SEC. So that defense going to have to be salty in the front seven. Some fascinating stuff there when you look deep into the schedule. The AP did another top 25 poll today, and I know Ralph Russo personally. He's one of my very favorite college football journalists. I think he is absolute salt to the earth, trustworthy guy. I'm not so sure how I felt about them allowing teams that aren't playing football to be in the preseason top 25. I saw Ivan Maisel joke, let's go ahead and rank the 1997 Nebraska team in here while we're at it, since they're also not playing. And in fact, just rank all the teams ever. But Ivan may have been taking some poetic liberties there for the sake of humor. But I would have rather seen a poll without those teams in there myself. Look, because part of getting to this juncture of the season is having leadership that has the fortitude and I think also the intelligence to provide these opportunities for these college football players. When these players sign scholarship papers, it goes both ways, right? It goes both ways. The player says, yes, I'm going to play for you. I'm making that commitment. I'm signing. I'm going to be held to the letter. If I transfer within the league, I'm going to sit out for a year. If I want to transfer someone else, the NCAA will have to grant me a waiver. But on the flip side, the school owes the player too. They're saying, we're going to give you this opportunity. We're going to grant you this scholarship. And in canceling their seasons, I feel like the Big Ten and the Pac-12 discriminated against student athletes. You think about discrimination, and it's such a heavy word. A lot of times you attribute it with race or religion, but that's not always the case. Discrimination is treating a party of people, a group of people, different than you treat others. And in my mind, the student athletes in the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were discriminated against versus the regular students, right? The regular students get to continue to pursue their opportunities, be it online or in the classroom, whether that's going to vet school, wanting to be a pharmacist, maybe majoring in English, but the student athletes, they said, you know what? Not you guys. You can't pursue your dreams and ambitions. We know when you signed with us, we made that pledge, but we're going to say no. And what was very disappointing about it wasn't just that they did it, but when they did it. Why so early? In hindsight, you look at the SEC's decision to start on September 26th. That's the same time the Pac-12 and the Big Ten were going to start too. There was plenty of time to let this play out, especially when you consider that a lot of these Big Ten schools are letting these players continue to practice. Now they're under a 20-hour rule instead of a 40-hour rule. But really, what's the difference? I don't understand. I think this was a tremendous failure on the Big Ten's part. I think what it does do is it certainly magnifies the level of organization and professionalism that Greg Sankey operated with as the SEC commissioner. All those weekly calls with the athletic directors, with the presidents, with the task force, the medical task force that the SEC put together from the jump, a bunch of medical experts. Obviously, you saw Ron Corson from the University of Georgia representing the Bulldogs, the best and brightest minds, all joining together to advise. Greg Sankey seeking outside advice from people like Condoleezza Rice and some of the top statisticians, epidemiologists. He didn't just sit there and let it happen to him. He was proactive in how he investigated this to make sure he gave these student athletes the best possible opportunity to realize that ambition. Greg McGarity from Georgia, this is what Greg told me. He said, we understand that these student athletes only have about a 3 or a 5 year window to get it done. And we owe it to them as an athletic department and as a university to do everything we can to give them that opportunity. And I say bravo to Greg McGarity, because that's the mindset that's allowed the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC to move forward. Now, September 26th isn't here yet. We've got some hurdles to climb. We need more people wearing masks. We need these numbers to go down. And we've got to hope that we make those scientific and medical advancements to minimize the potential injuries or risks for these student athletes. There's a lot of data out there right now. Not all the medical experts agree, and really only time will tell, but I look at football as a game of chance anyway. It's a game of risk. It's a game where early on in life, you have to decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? We talk about COVID-19 and myocardial infarction, potential long-term heart issues and effects. But what about the concussions? What about the issues with your knees and your body parts and potentially paralysis in football games? There's always been a risk element. And I ask myself, and I don't know the answer yet, how much more of a risk factor is COVID-19 for that 18 to 24-year-old athletes than the risks that they already expose themselves to by playing the football game? I don't think there's one right answer. I think it's up to each individual. And thankfully, the NCAA has some legislation saying, you know what, if you play this season, you're not going to lose any eligibility. That's right. Even the seniors can come back for another year and not count against that 85 scholarship limit. The NCAA Board of Governors approved that on Friday. So you don't lose any eligibility by playing. And by the same token, if you decide you want to sit out because you don't want to be exposed to those risk factors, well, the league says, okay, we're not going to charge you for that either. You're going to remain in good standing and you're going to hold your scholarship. So I like the fact that college football, the NCAA, the various conferences, they're giving these players the freedom. Freedom is such a key word right now. You know, that's what our country is built on, is freedom. You think about the sacrifices that people before us, men and women, made before us in the wars to defend the United States' ability to have the freedom to make decisions. And that's kind of where we're at right now as a society, as we try to battle and move forward through this pandemic. We all have the freedom to make the decision of what's best for us. And the ACC and the Big 12 and the SEC upheld that freedom for these players. It was disappointing to see the Pac-12 and the Big 10 take that freedom away, especially when you consider that the Big 10 commissioner, Kevin Warren, has a son that's playing football at Mississippi State. And Kevin Warren has apparently left that decision up to his son, but it wasn't a decision that he left up to the players in the Big 10. Very disappointing. It's going to be very hard for the Big 10 to recover from this, even if they play spring football, which quite frankly, I don't think is very realistic. At this point, I think it's a desperate attempt to try to hold players in the programs so that they don't transfer away. We saw Ole Miss coach Lane Kiffin. He says, I think that's unfair. I think they should be able to transfer right away. Now, some people might say, well, Lane Kiffin, you're only saying that because you've got about 7 scholarship spots available and it benefits your program. And they might be right. But by the same token, if a student athlete, or excuse me, if a student was taking that pharmacology class at Indiana University and suddenly he couldn't take it, would he not have the freedom to take his transcript and go somewhere else where he could pursue his ambitions? I think that he could. So there's a lot of hypocrisy right now in some of these other leagues. They've got a lot of tough questions to answer. And we've seen a lot of the Big Ten parents, they went to Rosemont, a suburb of Chicago, to protest at the Big Ten headquarters. We saw Justin Fields on Good Morning America pleading for a final season. You know, Justin started out at Georgia and elected to transfer to the Big Ten. And, you know, he had a great season for the Buckeyes last year, but it's starting to look like that might be his only season up there, as he's probably a top 25, if not a top 10 NFL prospect. So a lot of those players could be leaving, even if there is a spring season. And I think Nick Saban equated that to JV football. So far in the SEC, it's going to be the varsity. September 26th, Georgia goes to Arkansas. Not sure if you saw the stadium plan. No away tickets. Don't know how many Dog fans would have gone there to Razorback Stadium anyway. It's a beautiful part of the country. You know, Sam Pittman's going to be welcoming Kirby Smart with a warm handshake at the pregame field, probably saying, hey, Kirby, please don't get too carried away. Sam inherits a very difficult situation at Arkansas, but let me tell you, he is so well liked and so well respected that I believe Sam, you know, at first, I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical of that hire, but the more I've heard Sam talk and the buzz that I'm hearing generated for Arkansas, I think Sam Pittman is probably Arkansas's best hope of getting that program rolling again. They got to be able to have a presence in Texas, right? Texas A&M's emergence into the league hurt Arkansas probably more than any other program, because Arkansas was able to recruit out of Texas and say, hey, if you want to play the SEC, we're right here. LSU also, of course, LSU, a lot of in-state talent. Arkansas, not so much. So some big challenges from Arkansas. Going to be interesting. Two teams probably don't know a whole lot of what to expect. Sam knows the Georgia personnel, probably doesn't know what Todd Monken's going to do. Hope you were able to catch the first part of the show today. We had Jacob Hester on. I thought Jacob did a great job giving us some ideas and some concepts that he worked with under Todd Monken, talked about the importance of the running back, talked about the importance of the tight end, talked about how teams were going to try and defend an air raid spread offense. We're all still trying to figure out where Georgia's going to end up. And I think, to be honest, Georgia probably is too. I do think Jamie Newman will be the starting quarterback at Arkansas, but I very much believe that JT Daniels is going to be in the mix. And I would say right now, I would put odds that by the end of the year, he would get a start. Not because Jamie Newman's not a great quarterback, but the odds are that there could be a game that Jamie gets banged up. Just if you look at recent SEC history, only 4 out of 14 teams had a quarterback start every game. And then last year, Jamie even missed a game. He missed the Florida State game with a shoulder injury, and that was the ACC. Now you got SEC game to game to game to game to game, and Georgia doesn't get that bye week. until October 31st. That was going to be the cocktail party, but that game has now been bumped back. And unfortunately, I kind of liked where it was before. And that's just the way that's going to play out. So a lot of things for Georgia fans to kind of decipher right now, a lot of questions that can only be answered in practice and by Kirby Smart and by the players. But got the tone last week, talking with the different players they made available via the Zoom call. These guys are very dialed in. They're very focused. We heard Kearis Jackson talk about the offense playing fast, everybody being in the right spot. Let me tell you, that's big news. And that's what you hear about Todd Monken. He's a very disciplined, perfectionist kind of guy, wants those routes run perfectly, wants the guys to compete. Who can do it the best? Like coaches that empower like that. When you can make practice a competition now, that's what these players rise to. That's why they're at Georgia. They're some of the best high school players in the country, and they know they're going to be thrown in a ring with other best players in the country. And it's just a matter to see who rises to the top in this environment. Such an exciting time for Georgia football. I got one more thing I want to add here. I was talking with some Georgia folks around campus, and I know Georgia has the Circle of Honor, and I respect that. I think that's wonderful. There's some great players and great figures from other sports, but a guy that's missing that belongs up there, and we saw him on the program earlier this year, and I didn't even notice he wasn't in there till recently. That's Ray Goff. Ray Goff led Georgia to an SEC championship and was the SEC Player of the Year in 1976. That alone is pretty remarkable. Now, back then in 1976, you didn't have 10 All-American teams, right? And so Ray wasn't an All-American. At quarterback, there's only one of them. It's so hard to be an All-American, and that's one of the requirements for this Circle of Honor. But listen, if you're the SEC Player of the Year, I think that qualifies, especially if you lead the Dogs to a championship. Then you consider the 8 years that Ray spent on Vince Dooley's staff at Georgia when the program was building and solidifying off the 1980 national championship. And then the years Ray was head coach. Look, he didn't win a national title. We know it didn't work out as well as a lot of people wanted, but he recruited Kirby Smart. And what if he hadn't? Where would Georgia be right now without Ray Goff? And of course, everyone knows the story. Ray has stayed in the local community. He's a big part of this very successful, proud, well-run Zaxby's franchise that's based right here near Athens. I think a lot of people in this neck of the woods are awful proud of Zaxby's and the job that they do. And Ray Goff is one of the owners out there that's making that happen. So I put it together, folks. I say, look, here's a guy that was the SEC Player of the Year that led the program to a championship. He served 8 years as an assistant. He served 7 years as a head coach. And recruited Kirby Smart, and now he's become a successful businessman and Georgia ambassador in the community. How in the world is Ray Goff not in that Circle of Honor? If anybody is deserving, I believe it's Ray, because I think he touches all the bases. You think about some of these other sports like swimming. If a swimmer wins one event at the national meet, he's an All-American. I mean, that's just not quite the same as being the SEC Player of the Year and playing quarterback. And I don't want to take anything away from swimmers. I'm just saying, I think it's time that Georgia reconsiders and takes a look about what that Circle of Honor is all about. And Ray Goff, to me, is very deserving. That's it for me. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight on our On the Beat segment. Always appreciate Ingles' support and sponsorship. Jacob Hester was an absolutely perfect guest. I love doing his show on Sirius XM Radio. SEC This Morning, he goes on there with Chris Doring. Always enjoy talking with those guys, and really appreciated Jacob returning the favor and giving us some real insight into what it was like to play for Kirby Smart, but also what it was like to be a part of an offense run by Todd Monken that led the SEC and was 9th in the nation in 2006. Think about that. What if Todd Monken can do that for Georgia this year? I think everybody would be pretty happy. So thanks a lot again for joining me. Everybody have a great Monday night, and we'll talk to you later this week.